Hey, before we get into today's episode, Brian and I wanted to point you to a great new resource that we created in response to one of the biggest complaints that men have been bringing us over the past year, which is, I cannot compliment a woman anymore in the Me Too era. Without a doubt, gentlemen, these are confusing times when it comes to the new rules of courting and engaging with women, but we want to dispel the myth that you cannot compliment a woman anymore right here, right now. One of our most popular podcasts to date is 4 Essential Skills to Complimenting a Woman in the Me Too Era. And we thought that we'd create a simple download that has the 4 key problems that you're facing with complimenting women in the Me Too era, and also the 4 essential skills to complimenting women. So if you go to doinnerwork.com/compliments, doinnerwork.com/compliments, you can get this free PDF download that has the 4 problems and the 4 essential skills. And we've also got a bunch of different stories from women as to how they like to be complimented and how they don't like to be complimented. So head on over to doinnerwork.com/compliments. Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast.
Did you know that the average middle-aged man today has half the testosterone that the same aged man in the 1940s had? Well, there may be a number one culprit for this, which I will name in a moment. But this dastardly villain, in addition to causing both man-boobs and wilting your erections, is also responsible for fat gains, depression, hormonal disruption, immune dysfunction, blood clotting, cancer, and infertility. Holy hell, who is this insidious unnamed evil? The name is estrogenics. What the hell are estrogenics? Quite simply, estrogenics are external estrogen sources. You eat them, you drink them, you apply them to your skin, you even inhale them. And when done so over a long period of time, throws your hormone system way out of whack. Now, today's guest on our podcast is Dr. Anthony J., the author of Estrogeneration, How Estrogenics Are Making You Fat, Sick, and Infertile. And he believes that we as a society are swimming in external estrogen sources, and his book is loaded with research that proves his point. I came across Dr. J's book about a year ago when I started to notice a change in my libido, which had been pretty strong for the first 38, 39 years of my life, and I wanted to know what was up. And in reading his book, I was completely awakened to how many different products and how many different foods that I was eating or consuming or applying to my skin that were basically exposing me to these harmful estrogen sources that were potentially throwing my hormone system out of whack. And after making a number of the changes that he suggests in this book, and as you'll hear on this podcast, I've definitely noticed an uptick in my energy levels, in my brain clarity, but also, voila, my sex drive. And I'm doing a bunch of other stuff in conjunction with this, but I have a belief that a lot of what he suggested has been responsible for the gains in my life. Now, estrogenics, again, can be found in our foods, in your cleaning products, your plastics, your sunscreens, just to name a few. And the long-term effects of swimming in a sea of estrogenics are obesity, chronic sickness, declining dick health. So in today's episode, Dr. J goes into his top 10 list of estrogenic sources to avoid. This is really helpful. The 2 foods that every man should avoid. Soy is one of those that most guys know about, but there's another source that's 3 times more loaded with estrogenics than soy that I was putting into my morning smoothie every day for 7 years. And it's a common ingredient in most multigrain breads and a lot of protein bars today. So fellas, you're going to want to know about that one. Why you should throw out all of your sunscreens and use 3 alternatives that Dr. J recommends. What's causing this troubling trend of testosterone decline at the same time that obesity is inclining? Why you should get your testosterone checked annually, which is also something that Dr. Amy Killen recommended in the first episode we did on How to Keep Your Dick Healthy, which is still one of our most popular and best performing podcasts. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that one. And finally, why you should not rely on America's FDA standards and take command of your own decisions of what products that you're buying and what you're exposing yourself to. Here's the second installment of How to Keep Your Dick Healthy with Dr. Anthony J. All right, Dr. J, we're going to get started. And I don't know if you noticed, but I am drinking a piping hot soy milk red velvet latte from a number 7 plastic mug sprinkled with flaxseed. Am I in proper condition to get started?
Yeah, you've obviously read my book.
That is a direct line from your book. I added the flaxseed for good measure. Your book had a profound impact on me last year when I was starting to experience some changes in my sex drive that I'd become accustomed to a different way of living for the first 38, 39 years of my life. And when I picked up your book, Estrogeneration, How Estrogenics Are Making You Fat, Sick, and Infertile, I saw these 7 deadly things that you outlined around estrogenetics. And I want to hit these quickly before I ask you for the definition of what estrogenetics are. The 7 deadly things that estrogenetics cause are fat gains, depression, hormonal disruption, immune dysfunction, blood clotting, cancer, and infertility. So the question for you is, what the hell are estrogenetics and what are these monsters doing to us?
It's a bigger issue than most people give it credit, right? And all of those things you list, they're not immediate. It's not like bloating or headaches or things like that. It's things that build up over time and they're on the rise throughout our whole society. When I was first discovering all of this information and it was building on itself, I realized most of these issues, they're kind of a perversion of natural pregnancy. Men, our estrogen is around 20 nanograms per liter. And most people don't realize, like, women's estrogen is also around 20, but it usually goes up to about 200 depending on the time of the month. You know, it ranges between 20 and 200. You know, it's not that far apart. So you see these problems in men and women. But then, of course, when women get pregnant, their estrogen goes sky high. And then you see a lot of different changes like fat gains, right? I mean, women that are pregnant actually gain fat. And that's a natural adaptation because our ancestors didn't always have access to food in order to protect the fetus, have plenty of nutrition. They store more fat, right? When your estrogen goes up. But then if you throw in these artificial estrogen chemicals, which we're going to talk about, your body thinks you're pregnant to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. It's perversion. It's not exactly the same, but you store more fat. You get postpartum depression type syndrome. You know, like you get depression. You get breast tissue development, right? Like gynecomastia for men, man-boobs, you know. For women, it's breast cancer is increased because it's a perversion. It's not exactly the same as just getting, you know, you'd say, well, let's take BPA and get bigger breasts. Well, it doesn't really work that way for women. You get more breast cancer and on and on. You just go down the list and you realize these health issues, they kind of can be framed in the context of natural pregnancy, but a perversion of that. And then it starts to make sense. Oh, I see what's going on, right? We're triggering that natural estrogen response. And nowadays we're just basically saturated in these artificial estrogens, which are basically chemicals that act like estrogen in your body, but they don't do it exactly the same as estrogen. There's some perversion to it.
Right. And in reading your book, you have a top 10 list, an IRS 10 list of where we are swimming in these estrogenetics. And I had no idea how pervasive they were. They're in everything. What if you can maybe just give us a few regular household items or foods or things that we would normally consume or put on our bodies that most people have no idea is causing this? That'd be helpful.
Well, sunscreen is a huge one right now because it's making news, right? They finally started doing some tests on sunscreen after having these chemicals legal for the last 25 plus years, you know, like oxybenzone, benzophenone, you know, methyl benzaldine camphor. There's a few of these chemicals. Of course, I list them specifically in my book, and I'm literally going to jump over to my Instagram page to try and find the exact quote from the FDA. I mean, it's amazing, you know, the fact that these have been legalized. The quote I'm looking for, again, it's on my Instagram, but it's basically saying, and if I can't find it, I'll just start saying it, but it's basically saying that, you know, number one, oops, like these chemicals actually go into your blood. And then number two, the levels from one application of sunscreen that has oxybenzone, which most of them do, the cheap ones do, from one application, it stays in your blood 7 days. For those days, it's above the FDA's own limit or the EPA's own limit. Their own regulations are being effectively shattered, their own upward limits, their safety limits.
Yeah. I have a question for you. I know we're going to go through some more products today, but sunscreen being a great example. So it's a bit of a, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, don't put it on, you get skin cancer. Do put it on, your estrogen goes skyrocket, and all those other negative effects that you just talked about. 2 questions. 1, are there products out there that we can use from a sunscreen perspective, like alternatives? And then 2, what's the deal just universally here with products that create more estrogen? Like, why is it estrogen? Why aren't there products that create more testosterone on accident or create other things that are maybe more beneficial?
I know. Isn't that funny? Mark Bell asked me that when I was talking to him about this on his podcast, because he's a power lifter and he's set the world record on the bench press. I think he benched 850 pounds at one point.
And if he wasn't using sunscreen, man.
Where are the testosterone chemicals? I want some of those.
Right.
And let me start with the alternative for sunscreen, right? Because there's 3. One of them is pretty extreme. I'll give you that one first. It's called melanotan 2. You can inject yourself with a peptide. It increases your melanocyte, it stimulates your melanocytes, and your skin gets tan. So a lot of bodybuilders use that. That's pretty extreme. You have to inject it. Your stomach acid destroys it. Again, that's crazy extreme. The other alternative that's not extreme is zinc sunscreen. You can buy zinc sunscreens with ingredients that you can pronounce. It works. It's phenomenal. Sometimes it makes your skin white. Sometimes it doesn't. You have to find a good product. But that's probably the best alternative. And then the third thing that I do personally now is I dress up. I get my sun shirt. I even have sun gloves when I go fishing, because I go out all day. I go hard, I go on the ocean. I'll fish all day. I'm sticking my hands in the water. So I even wear the little sun gloves with the fingertips cut off. I've got a hat that has a little neck thing on it.
That's a nice alternative if you don't have a 6-pack also. So I can get on board with that. Yeah.
It's not that hot. If you wear like a light colored sun shirt, it's surprisingly cool. And then you don't have to spend all this money on sunscreen all the time. So those are 3 good ways to do it, I think.
Right.
I want to turn maybe to some foods. One of the things that I learned from reading your book was that the 2 foods that every man should stay away from are soy, which I knew about. Flaxseed was the other culprit. Then you said these 2 by far and away. And flaxseed, like I think by a level of 3 times as much in soy. Triple, right? Yeah. When I read that, I looked back at my previous 7 years of morning routine, which was a smoothie that had a heaping tablespoon of flaxseed every morning for 7 consecutive years. How long does it take to cleanse that from my system?
Dominic was distraught when I remember this a year ago. You came to me, you're like, can you believe what I've been doing? I've been doing flaxseed. I'm like, who cares? Like, it's flaxseed. Like, you don't understand. It's killing me.
Yeah, everybody says it's good for you, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, they did a study. I mean, you have to go to the study first. And they did a study in Canada, over 100 food items. They just looked at plant foods like broccoli, kale, whatever, 100 of them. And all of them were under 1,000 micrograms. I'll just use the word, I'll just say units, right? They're all under 1,000 units of plant estrogen, phytoestrogen, except for soy and flax. Soy and flax were over 100,000. It wasn't even like in the same ballpark. It wasn't even the same state. It was in a different country. So soy and flax, soy specifically was 100,000 something and flax was 300,000 something. And there's plenty of studies that show that flax is more estrogenic. It increases estrogen in your body. They've done blood tests. I just gave a talk for the special operations for the military. I showed them the studies, right? I had them on my slides, my presentation, showing that flax is more estrogenic. The thing about flax that's kind of unique compared to soy is it does have a few beneficial aspects. Number 1, omega-3s, of course, which not a lot of people need, and those are beneficial, so there's benefits there. But the thing is, of course, you can get those from elsewhere, right? You don't have to get the estrogen plus the omega-3s. You can just do the omega-3s. And then the other aspect is it does have CBD, which I didn't know when I wrote my book, I don't think. I learned that since then because it's kind of new information. But again, you don't need to get CBD from flax. Like you can better by going straight to the hemp plant. And as you know, the hemp plant also has a little bit of estrogenic potential. But it's nothing like soy and flax in terms of eating those foods. Those are the only ones people eat. The other two that are airborne, lavender essential oil, they've done studies on multiple different brands and everything. People are always saying, well, my brand is okay because they purify with CO2 or whatever. It's like, well, they studied it. They keep publishing stuff. Even after I published my book, they've come out with new studies on this confirming. And then the other one is cannabis smoke. If you're smoking cannabis, it does increase estrogen. There's fertility risks. If you're a teenager, you're developing, your hormones are still in that fragile state. So those are the other two that I would add to the plant estrogen category. And of course, when you start purifying things, all bets can be off, right? Like if you start purifying essential oils and things, like for example, I think Rose Auto, OTTO, Rose Auto increases natural estrogen. It's not an endocrine disruptor. It doesn't disrupt your testosterone and things like that, but it does increase estrogen. So that's another one that fairly recently came out as a little bit of a concern because most guys don't want to increase their estrogen. Right. I mean, some people do, like postmenopausal women do. They want to increase it without throwing off all their other hormones. So Rose Auto might be a great choice for certain people, even lavender, right? For certain people, it's anti-inflammatory, but just in the context of increasing estrogen, I would avoid it. But then back to the testosterone question, I'm just looking at Brian and remembering he asked me about testosterone. And I hope I'm not going on and on and on too long because I tend to do that. It's a little complicated, and I didn't go into this level of complication in my book. I tried to keep it super simple and readable, but testosterone has one receptor. It's called the androgen receptor. So when you've got testosterone in your body, it goes throughout your blood, boom, it binds that androgen receptor and it has an effect. Testosterone actually has two receptors. It's called estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta. So it's more complicated, right? Because some tissues have a lot of beta, some tissues have a lot of alpha. So those have different, and there's actually technically three estrogens. There's estrone, there's estriol, there's estradiol. So they call them E1, E2, E3. The main point of that is that scientists call the estrogen receptor promiscuous, which I think is hilarious. I use it every time I publish a paper. I try and throw that in there because I think it's funny. That's just what they call it. So you can get away with it in professional science journals and stuff. The estrogen receptor is promiscuous, meaning it binds all kinds of different things. It sticks to all kinds of different substances because you've got three estrogens and two receptors. So it's more prone to sticking to things.
I wonder how the feminist population feels that the estrogen receptor is named the promiscuous one, but we'll leave that the conversation for another day. So to frame up this testosterone conversation, in your book, you talk about how in the 1940s, the average middle-aged men had approximately double the amount of testosterone that middle-aged men have today. And so let's talk about that. What are the impacts of having half of the amount of testosterone as, say, someone just a few generations ago, and how might that show up in my energy levels, my sex drives, these kinds of things?
It's insane. And it does depend on your genetics. I do DNA consulting for people, and there is some variability in terms of how some people respond to estrogen in worse, have worse impacts. Some people, they clear estrogen better, but I think for everybody, it's not ideal to be dosing up with estrogen all the time. And if you looked up the Massachusetts aging study, you'll see like in 1980s, the testosterone was around 500. And in the 90s, the average male was about 400. And then in the 2000s, it was about 300. And now you're seeing all kinds of people coming in at 200 and 250 and things. So it's almost been dropping, like 100 every 10 years.
That also seems to correspond with the other statistic you have in your book about obesity, which is in 1990, 10% of Americans were declared obese. In 2000, 20% were. In 2010, 30%. So you're talking about at the same time that our testosterone is going down, our obesity levels are going up. Is it fair to say, in the work that you've done, that you believe a lot of the roads lead back to these exogenous estrogens that we're consuming?
Yeah, for sure. It's never one thing, but it's like, why expose yourself to these chemicals when you don't have to? This one seems like an easy one for me. This is definitely a case of knowledge is power. If you don't know, you're just going to keep putting them on your skin. You're going to keep eating them in your foods. You're going to keep breathing them in your essential oils, whatever. But as soon as you know, at least you have the choice. Like right now, people aren't even choosing because they have no clue. And there's so many, right? It's pervasive. As you saw when you read the book, you realize, it's a bigger problem than most people are giving it credit, because most scientists that are studying it, they're studying it just from one chemical perspective. They're just looking at BPA. They're just looking at phthalates. They're just looking at parabens. They're only looking at soy. And they're all complaining about all of those things, but they're doing it individually and independently in isolation, because that's kind of how scientists do research. They don't look at all of these things together because that's overwhelming. But that story is there if you piece it together. And that's what I did with the book, because I wanted to avoid these estrogen chemicals. I've got kids, I'm a man,
Yeah.
My wife is a woman. I don't want her getting breast cancer. There's even a book called, or a documentary called Stink. Yeah. And it's by a guy there from New York. And he, his wife died of breast cancer, left him with 2 daughters. And he bought them some pajamas, and they smelled extremely like chemicals, like super sketchy, right? And it's from a high-end store there in New York City. He literally cut off a piece and had them chemically tested, because he called the company and they wouldn't admit to using any chemicals, right? And he's like, well, it smells like chemicals. What's in this stuff? And of course, they just said, well, it's manufactured in China. It's all FDA approved, EPA approved, all this sort of thing. He'd had them tested, and all these estrogens I talk about in my book were loaded up in these clothing materials. So they're just reeking with these chemicals. And then he went through some of the stuff that I went through just specific to breast cancer. A lot of people, they want to say it's just man specific, and then it's just estrogen, so it probably doesn't affect women. But man, I think women are just as affected. And there's low testosterone with women too, as I say in my book, right? Mm-hmm. We weren't testing women back in the 1940s because the levels are so much different, and we didn't have the tools back then to test that, that sensitive level, that change, those minor changes. The levels are so low, but it's a problem across the board.
Right on.
It makes me feel a little bit less crazy. Crazy for buying organic sheets that don't have bad dyes in it, right? Like lotion that's a little bit more expensive. So I appreciate this, because sometimes I'm like, is it really worth it? Is it really worth paying 50% more, or going to find the thing that's harder to find when I can just buy it off of Amazon pretty easily? So this is helpful that it's there's a lot of different inputs to our estrogen and testosterone levels.
Yeah, it's 100% worth it. And that's the thing, is most people are pretty short-term motivated, even the stock market, right? Like, I was listening to Charles Cook on Tim Ferriss's podcast talking about how the reason he's been successful as a company, he's a multi-billionaire. The reason he's been successful is because he's had a long-term vision. Similar with, what's his name? The Hathaway guy. Another billionaire.
Warren Buffett?
Yeah, Warren Buffett.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't blanking on his name. But no, Warren Buffett says the exact same thing. Like, the reason he's been successful is he's had this long-term vision. And he's always had that, whereas most companies have this quarterly vision. They're trying to increase profits quarterly. And for your health, it's a similar thing. You can't just have that quarterly vision. You have to have the multi-year vision. You have to look ahead. And the personal care products, they sneak them in. I think that's the worst hidden source, the most insidious hidden source, because you've got the sunscreen chemicals in the lotions,
Yeah, hit some of those other products too that people just normally consume without even knowing.
Consume or rub on their skin.
What's that?
Consume, like eating or rubbing on their skin.
Any of those, right? So the consumer products, like I know lotions and soaps that go ahead, hit those.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the fragrances are what gets people. And they don't realize these companies are legally allowed to sneak parabens in the fragrances and all this other stuff, phthalates. It's crazy. They're putting phthalates in your personal care products. They're plastic chemicals. They're just cheap petroleum-based products, so they're cheap. They're fillers. But they're allowed to legally do that because it's supposedly their secret formula, so they don't have to reveal it, which protects their secret fragrance or whatever. But in reality, they're just using these cheap fillers. Of course, they're all estrogen chemicals.
Yeah.
So anything with fragrance really is a questionable issue unless they've got the ingredients listed out, or it says it's paraben free, phthalate free, BPA free, this free, that free, the other thing free, which is hard to do.
I've noticed that's been challenging in some of the products that I've bought. So when I finished reading your book, I went through all of the moisturizers and the soaps and everything that I had, right? And like I had Dove soap. I needed to replace that. And you have a list of products that you buy on your website, which I've since followed, and I will link that in the show notes. I replaced soft soap, the hand soap that I used for a long time, because it has red dye number 40. And you talk quite a bit in the book about any of the dyes, but maybe you can hit red dye number 40 and the other dyes as why we need to not buy products with those dyes in them.
what's interesting about it is as you go through these ingredients and these top 10 lists and all this, I did a compare and contrast in the book where I compared Europe versus America and the laws in Europe and America. And it's super telling. I mean, just how many of these chemicals are totally illegal in America or in Europe, and then they're all just no regulation in America with all of these.
You will like America less after reading this book.
I know.
I mean, it's horrifying, some of the differences in the standards that we have here. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to take care of yourself, really. That's what it comes down to. You can't trust the government to look out for you on these chemicals. In fact, it might even be the opposite, because what it really boils down to is the corporate influence on the politicians in America and how they're funding the campaigns and they're getting all this stuff.
Estrogen goes so deep.
Yeah.
Estrogen goes straight to the heart of America here.
I don't think it's a conspiracy, like a lot of people ask me, and it's just they weren't doing the research, like with BPA, it might have been a conspiracy because they were studying it as a birth control in the 1920s. Like it was discovered in the 1880s or something. And they knew right away it was acting like estrogen, and they tested it for birth control. But then when they discovered you can make plastic out of it, they turned in that direction. And then they convinced everybody that it doesn't leach. There's no leaching. It doesn't end up in your water if you've got it in a water bottle. And then, of course, they've totally reversed that position because it's so obvious now that we can measure those levels, the levels of estrogen with our technology. You can't lie anymore about it. I mean, I don't think they knew, right? Maybe they weren't lying, but you can't pretend like it's not leaching any longer.
Yeah.
So then they've used all these substitutes, which are just as estrogenic, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I mean, even get into the water of things, meaning maybe this might be one area that I haven't necessarily upgraded where I should, because I did replace all of my plastic Tupperware with glass Tupperware, but I still use Brita water filter. I think when I bought it, it says BPA free and paraben. Should I be buying water in glass jugs, or should I have a water filtration system if I want to be protected?
Well, it's funny, I use the Brita one when I travel, right? Like if I go on a 7-day vacation or something, I was just at the lake, I literally bring my Brita filter water in there. I try and put it in a glass pitcher and store it in the glass after I filter it into the plastic pitcher.
Okay.
But, it doesn't always work. Sometimes I have to just keep it in the fridge, keep it cold. There's a lot less transfer of these chemicals when something is cold versus when it's hot. So that's one thing. The solution I found that's really successful, I mean, anything with activated charcoal, first of all, removes artificial estrogen. So it removes all the shit in the water. If you've got a filter with activated charcoal, it's at least taking it out, right? You might be putting a little bit back in with the BPA bottles or even the BPA-free bottles, which have BPS or BPAF or BPF, all these analogs, which are just as estrogenic, which most people don't realize. I should almost emphasize the crap out of that, right? Like if you get a BPA-free bottle, it's probably made from BPS, bisphenol S. They've done studies on BPS. It's just as estrogenic as BPA, just as bad for you as BPA.
Will it say BPS in the ingredient list, or how do you see? How will you know?
It'll be plastic number 7.
Plastic number 7 is.
Yeah, if it's got the little recycling symbol and a number 7 on it, it's one of the bisphenols. It'll be BPA, it'll be BPS, it'll be BPA, BPAF. Excuse me. You can go through the alphabet.
all the BPs, they're all estrogenic.
Oh, yeah. And then some of them are even worse. Some of them are more estrogenic than BPA, so they've replaced them with worse chemicals, yeah.
Like an Aquafina bottle, Dasani bottle of water, would those be? No,
those are usually phthalates. Those are usually plastic number 1. You'll see on the recycling symbol, I have a number 1 on it. That's polyethylene terephthalate, PHTHALATES.
Okay.
Phthalates are certainly estrogenic. They're a huge problem. Thousands of publications on it. People get into some debate about it because there's not just one phthalate. Like BPA is just one chemical, but phthalates, it's a whole class. Similar with parabens, like parabens is a whole class. It's like methylparaben, propylparaben, butylparaben. There's all these different ones.
Yeah.
If you pick one of the phthalates to study, it's going to be different than the next phthalate and the next phthalate. So that can get complicated really fast, especially because your body breaks them down, and the breakdown products are also estrogenic. So it just gets like this snowball effect of estrogen.
You're swimming in it. It's
yeah. So the main point is to avoid plastics whenever you can, because even if it's BPA free, it's almost always got phthalates in it. And trust me, like I said, when I gave that talk for the military 2 weeks ago or last week or whatever, I read this quote. I have it in like one of the last chapters of my book. It just talks about phthalates and some of the medical problems that have been linked to phthalates, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And I read the whole quote, even though it's like super awkward to stand there and just read all these problems. It's literally like this giant paragraph of like shortening of anogenital distance and just like all these technical terms that are all related to reproductive problems. Or
I think I know what you're talking about. That one of the side effects is, I believe, and this was a Taiwanese study that you cited, was shortened penis.
Oh yeah, it's feminizing, right? Like,
let's start with that. Let's start with the shortened penis and work from there.
Yeah, it's this laundry list of problems.
Oh boy.
And I mean, some scientists are even being honest about it, and they're calling it male feminization because that's what it is, right? When you start to see those kind of changes. There's even animal studies looking at brain changes. If you give these chemicals to animals, there's motivational declines. Like we have less motivation, not just sexual drive motivation, but overall motivation to just do anything. And that's kind of specific to men compared to women when you have these exposures. So it's a problem.
Yeah. So, okay, now I'm driven down into a place where I'm feeling like no matter where I turn, I'm going to be consuming, breathing, rubbing in exogenous estrogens. And I want to take command, right? I want to take control. So,
well, you've done a lot with your personal care. I think personal care products is the foundation. You start there, filter your water. And now let me go back to filtering water too, because what I was going to say, my favorite resource that I discovered. So I had all these people out for free quotes to my house to do a reverse osmosis system. And they want to put a big plastic tank under my sink, like this giant plastic. Now they've come out with research saying there's a lot of bacteria that grow and like you're basically just got this big petri dish under your sink and it's plastic. So you're reverse osmosis filtering your water, which is awesome. And then you're sitting it in plastic. But I discovered this one. It's all stainless steel. It's called Purify Guru. It's reverse osmosis where it has a pump. So there's no big, giant, goofy storage thing under your sink. It just pumps it up, which is amazing. And I've used it for the last 6 months, at least, maybe even the last year. And I love it. And it's got activated charcoal in it. And then the reverse osmosis filter. It's got like 4 different stages. They're all stainless. And it was $500. I installed it myself. I didn't have the Culligan man come out. Their system was $1,000.
The Culligan.
All the other ones are like that's one of the cheaper ones.
Interesting. So Purify Guru is $500. If you are as inept as I am at installing anything, you can hire someone from that company to install it for you, or do you have to go and find it?
Yeah, I got you, Dominic. We're good. This is handy. Yeah,
that's where I have friends. Okay.
I had to learn how to drill into quartz, so I have a quartz countertop. And I bought a special diamond. So I tried carbide. You can do a carbide drill, like a hole saw, but it was too slow. It was taking forever and it's heating up the quartz. So then I went and bought a diamond tipped hole saw and drilled through my. So I did it myself. It's pretty extreme to do that, but it was amazing. Like if you do it yourself, use a diamond coated hole saw. And
Brian, I'm counting on you for knowing what all this means.
Just this conversation proves to me that Dr. J's testosterone levels are really high.
Oh man, yeah.
Going through quartz. It's beautiful.
I mean, they'll do that. The same companies that will do the standard conventional giant plastic storage tank units, they'll do it for you, or a contractor will do it. It's pretty basic stuff.
How often are you checking your testosterone? Like, is it you just know that these are the good materials out there and the good things to do, like, and that's great and it's good enough, or are you checking yourself pretty constantly?
Oh yeah, I just checked myself like 2 weeks ago. I work with a medical doctor. He used to be the medical doctor for a professional hockey team and a professional football team. He's a friend of mine. He does it for free for me, so thankfully, I have a little bit. But I do a lot of consulting for his clients and things. I would say like once a year is perfectly reasonable if you're in decent levels. Like I'm like 650 with my total testosterone. So I have good total testosterone. My free is kind of low. I've brought my free testosterone up quite a bit with infrared actually. Like it really brings it up for me. Do that right before you go to sleep. It's amazing.
Infrared sauna?
I just use the infrared light from Juve.
Infrared light from Juve. Yeah,
the company is JOOVV. I don't have any I don't make money from them or anything.
Okay.
And it is a real expensive product, but I like it because I use it at the Mayo Clinic where I do research. I literally use it on stem cells and things as part of my scientific research. which is basically my day job. So I like that product because it's well validated. They've done a lot of third-party testing and things. It's FDA approved as a medical device and things like this. So
you taking notes, Dominic? I'm taking notes.
Copious is the word to describe the notes that I'm taking.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? I mean, the problem with most people's stem cells, which is totally off topic it's a little bit related to estrogen because of epigenetics, right? I mean, that's how I got into the stem cell world, is because my whole book, Estrogeneration, it's not about this generation screwing itself up, which people assume from the title. It's actually about how we're screwing up the future generations with these epigenetic changes, which all sounds like technical jargon right now, just using the word epigenetics. But that's what I study, right? And I study how our stem cells are all screwed up, and then I try and fix them with things like infrared. I upgrade our stem cells. Like right now, most Americans have McDonald's stem cells. They're just full of crap. They're not healthy. If you take them out of your fat and then you re-inject them, you're not doing yourself any favors. But if you upgrade your stem cells, or you get somebody who's healthy and you take their stem cells, those are phenomenal. There's good benefits there.
Yeah. If we want to take a quick a tangent on stem cells, I think that'd be fascinating, because the first interview that we did around how to keep your dick healthy was with Dr. Amy B. Killen. Do you know her?
No, but maybe I'd have to see the face. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to connect you two, because she does work in stem cells. And
where is she located? Is she Florida?
She's Salt Lake City.
Okay. Yep. Yeah.
And she does a lot of work with, I forget the name of the other surgeon who's really well versed in stem cell therapies and back, Harry Adelson.
Okay.
And Dr. Amy focuses a lot on using stem cell injections in like your sexual organs, sexual areas.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So stem cell work, I know, is a big part of your research right now. I'm just kind of curious. So what are some of the specific things that you were studying, and what are some things that the lay person like us could get excited about?
So how I got into it, right, is from estrogen. So I used to study estrogen, testosterone, and those hormones. They're unique because they go into the cell, right? Which some hormones do, some hormones don't. A lot of hormones, they don't even go through the cell membrane. So a cell has like a pillowcase around it called the plasma membrane.
Okay.
The sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen, they go through the cell membrane. So they go into the cell. But not only do they do that, but they go into the nucleus, which has another membrane. Like our DNA is actually protected by an additional pillowcase called the nuclear membrane. Most people don't know that. Like in your basic biology, everybody talks about the plasma membrane, the lipid bilayer, all this stuff, the pillowcase on the outside of the cell, but most of them don't really remember that the nucleus, the DNA, has its own membrane inside. It's like a cell inside of a cell. What's crazy, estrogen and testosterone go through that membrane as well. That's a really rare thing. Most hormones don't go through the nuclear membrane because your DNA is super protected. You don't want stuff going into your DNA and screwing with it,
Mm-hmm.
But estrogen and testosterone do, which is kind of ironic, right? The sex hormones go in there and screw with your DNA. A lot of puns in there. But artificial estrogens, that's one of the biggest problems. They're going in there and they're screwing up your DNA. And not only that, the marks on top of your DNA, which are called epigenetic marks, and that's how it gets passed to the next generation. Like these health problems that are on the rise, they don't just stop with us. They actually get passed to the kids. And there's a guy named Michael Skinner. He's shown that it's 4 generations out in his animals. He grows 3,000 to 5,000 mice at any given time. Like if you show up at his lab, way bigger lab and bigger research than I do. And he's shown 4 freaking generations.
How does that work when you say it's 4 generations? Like, break that down.
So he's exposing the mother mouse to one of these chemicals. Atrazine. He's done atrazine, which is a herbicide that's estrogenic. He's done a bunch of the ones that I talk about in my book, actually. And not all of them, but probably 4 or 5 of the ones that I talk about in my book. And then he looks at the next generation. And some scientists have complained. So he discovered this in like 2005. And the paper that he published in 2005 was the most cited scientific research paper for 5 years straight. I mean, just a blockbuster, and nobody's heard of it, right? And out in the lab, and the doctors don't really know about it. But the researchers are like, holy shit. Because it's a giant finding, because some people have kind of looked at 3 generations, but he showed 4. And the big difference there is that 3 generations, imagine there's a mother mouse and she's pregnant. So the mother, if you expose her to BPA, she's being exposed, the fetus is being exposed, and then you can argue that the fetus has stem cells in there, like egg and sperm cells that are also being exposed. So that's 3 generations all in one shot, right?
Yeah.
And it's confusing because scientists call it F0, F1, F2.
Got it.
So when you read these studies, you don't intuitively realize that it's 4 generations when they talk about F3, because F3 is like the 4th generation. So it's super counterintuitive.
Well, to make sure I got this straight, you can expose just the mother.
Exactly.
And let's say and there's no exposure directly, then the 4th generation can actually have it show up in their genetic coding. Am I saying that correctly?
Exactly. And you see it physically in the health impacts, like in terms of their fertility goes down and their obesity goes up and all this 4 generations out. Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast the other day by a doctor who I'm sure you'll know because you did research in Alzheimer's. His name is Dr. Dale Bredesen. He wrote the book, The End of Alzheimer's, which
right.
I would highly recommend for anyone who has someone in their lives who's, suffering from memory loss or on their way to cognitive decline or is in Alzheimer's, because Dr. Dale Bredesen has found a series of protocols that still need to be large scale, scientifically proven to show they have mass effect. But a lot of his clinical trials over the last 10 or so years have shown that people with cognitive decline and even Alzheimer's itself has been able to not just slow the decline, but to reverse the decline. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to him on Dave Asprey's Bulletproof podcast. And one of the things that Dr. Dale Bredesen said that I thought was so perfect was most of what we call aging is really us just sucking at living. And he was saying that, things like Alzheimer's should be an incredibly rare disease, whereas now it's something that's almost like a given for a certain part of the population. And I also think of tying that back to this conversation and even the study that you just shared, if we stopped sucking so much with our ignorance, and not to beat ourselves up over, like, how the hell am I supposed to know that I'm chugging estrogen everywhere I go? But by having conversations like this and you doing this kind of pioneering work to say, you can't expect the government or FDA to come in and make those decisions for you. Like, you have to be a thoughtful consumer. And it's not just about you anymore. It's about your generations of offspring, if you presumably care about them, or the ones you're planning on having, that you could be exposing to this stuff too.
If you're at reproductive age and you even in the back of your mind think you might ever have kids, you should be way more cautious than if you're like 70 years old or whatever. Because, yeah, sure, it affects you for sure, but it's actually worse in future generations. That's the crazy thing, like the crazy finding. They've found this in other things too, like with cigarette smoke, for example. If your grandmother smoked, you're at a higher risk for asthma than your mother. And even if your mother didn't smoke. Like, wrap your head around that.
Wow.
Right? Like, if your grandmother smoked, your mother, yeah, she was at like a 2-fold higher risk for asthma. But now you're at a 3-fold higher risk for asthma. For example, it's not the exact number, but I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's higher. That's assuming that your mother didn't smoke and you don't smoke. You're both at a higher risk for asthma, but then the next generation is actually worse. And that's happening with all these estrogen chemicals as well.
I'm 40 years old. Brian just recently turned 39. Neither of us have had children because we're trying to do the responsible thing of detoxing decades worth of destruction that we've done to our gene system, so that when we do pass on, our genes will be much cleaner for the next generation.
That's what it is. That's why we don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, totally.
You convinced me for a minute there. Brian came on.
Hey, one of the things that you mentioned about this before is that you do consulting on DNA reports, and I saw this on your website. I'm going to sign up for this. I'm actually going to do something with you separately where you do read Ancestry and 23andMe DNA reports, and you provide consulting around that. Tell me what I can expect when we do that consultation.
Well, let's just talk about Alzheimer's, right? So I use the raw data. I don't look at what the 23andMe report provides because that's pretty much useless. Like 23andMe, if you pay the extra $100 to them and get their health report, it's so useless. It's kind of a joke. It'll tell you what eye color you have, whether cilantro might taste like soap or something like that. But I do 5 different categories, right? I do brain optimization genes. I do diet optimization. I do hormone optimization and detox, gym, like the training genes, and then sleep genes. So that's my 5 categories. And the brain, like, just using that as an example, because obviously I just mentioned 5 categories and they all have subcategories. There's a lot of stuff there. But the brain, just talking about Alzheimer's, since you brought Alzheimer's up, some people have an increased risk for Alzheimer's because their brain does not clear heavy metals very well, right? And so if you don't clear heavy metals like mercury or cadmium or chromium or vandate or whatever, you're at a risk for Alzheimer's from heavy metals, you should definitely have your hair checked for heavy metals and make sure you don't have heavy metals building up in your body, and make sure if you do, you get rid of them and whatever, you figure out the sources of heavy. But that's not the only risk for Alzheimer's. Like some people have an increased risk for Alzheimer's from inflammation, and the genes are actually related to lectin. It's a totally different category, totally different way of thinking about how you're going to prevent Alzheimer's, because it's all about prevention. And then another category would be cholesterol. Like some people have, or DHA, right, which are related to each other. And the ApoE gene, which gives, like if you've got the bad version of that, you have a 70% chance of getting Alzheimer's. But if you supplement DHA, it seems to go away. Like you probably don't have any risk if you're really consistent about supplementing a good version of DHA. So like that's an example. If you categorize Alzheimer's and you figure out which category you might have a risk in, and some people don't have any risk in any of the categories, and they don't have to even think about like spending money on DHA or whatever. But then if you do, it's worth paying that money, because not only will you prevent Alzheimer's, in most cases, you're going to actually optimize your brain's performance right now. So it's kind of an immediate thing and a long-term thing, which is obviously a win-win. And then the 23andMe, they're not going to tell you any of that.
That's the thing, is like I have all this data, I have no idea what to do with it. And so if you're telling me that like you can look at my specific report and tell me how I can optimize my brain functioning while also heading off any mysterious diseases at the pass, I'm down for that. I'm in on it. And you can, and you said that you also do the same thing for your hormone panels too?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. I look at all these genes that are involved in hormone processing and optimization. There's not as many as people think. There's a few, but there's probably a dozen, but it's not like there's hundreds or thousands. And we have 25,000 genes. We have thousands of genes, but in relation to the hormones, they're not that variable. We all respond shitty to artificial estrogens, in other words, right? Like it doesn't matter how good your genes are. If you keep exposing yourself to BPA, eventually it is going to catch up to you or your future generations. But then some of them increase your risk for breast cancer, prostate cancer, whatever. And there's specific strategies you can employ to get rid of those risks. And it's amazing how many, like there's a gene called CYP1B1. It's a liver enzyme. It's involved in breaking down artificial estrogens, right? If you've got a crappy version of that gene, almost everybody I talk to in consulting, I do hundreds of these, they have man-boobs. They have gynecomastia, at least all the guys, right? Because they're not processing xenoestrogens. And because we're all being exposed to artificial estrogens, it's giving those specific people man-boobs just almost every time. So they need to be more careful, right?
Our listeners need to get one of these tests done. I know you did one with Ancestry. I did mine with 23andMe, and I'm going to sign up. And what is this, like an hour long? I think you said it on your website. It's like about $300, which
yeah,
right. I mean, like that's totally doable. And Brian, I think we should both get one of these done, man.
Which is recoverable. By the way, the cost of that is recoverable within about 1 to 2 months of taking the wrong supplement. I feel like I've read so many studies and haven't read other studies, and they're all contradictory. And what's the right direction?
Exactly.
And this, it points me in the right direction in terms of what works for Brian, what works for Dominic, as opposed to just reading a study about magnesium.
Yeah. No, and I always try and do that. I try and find a priority list of supplements where it's like, okay, these 5 or these 10. Some people it's like 10, but some people it's 1. This is the priority supplement. And then all the rest of the stuff, cool, you can tinker with whatever you want, spend the money if you want, but this is the priority, for preventing this, that, and the other thing. That helps a lot to save money, I think, for sure.
That's a great call, Bri. I know that my cabinet is littered with supplements that, I've been told like I need to buy, but if like, for example, that thing that you talked about, like in the liver that doesn't exist for guys who have man boobs, like, if there's something in my system that's not metabolizing curcumin or not metabolizing creatine or not whatever it is, then like it would be really nice to know never to buy that shit again and actually like filter my money and my efforts towards the things that will specifically be useful for me.
Right. No, it's a huge thing. I mean, the problem is there's so many people doing what I do in the DNA consulting, but they do it at a kind of a really shallow level. They don't really understand the science, or they're just kind of guessing or whatever. And so it kind of puts a bad rap on a lot of it. Even the 23andMe, I think, is putting a bad rap on it because they do such a crappy job. People pay $100 and get this useless report. It literally doesn't inform them of anything. And so like, well, the DNA reports are totally a joke, I would conclude that as well. That's why I did it to begin with. That's why way back when 23andMe first started, I started doing this. And it was like 2010,
Oh,
It was
wow.
just because I wanted to look for my own DNA. Yeah, because I was, working in an Alzheimer's research lab at the time, and I was designing virus. I was actually making virus with the DNA. So you can actually make DNA and then put it in human cells, and the human cells will make virus for you, and they'll spit it out into the liquid that they live in. And then you take that liquid and you spin out the virus, and then you've got virus.
Wow.
Then you can inject those virus into animals and study animals, right? We were trying to cure Alzheimer's by injecting virus into animal brains, We call it neutered virus, like it was designed. I was designing the virus. It wasn't like a bad virus. It was supposed to be a good virus, right?
Oh, interesting. I'm not familiar with the concept of good viruses.
Well, it's just like in a computer. Like you technically could make a good virus. Nobody does, right? But you could, if you had a crappy computer and you didn't have any other way to fix it, you could make a good virus to fix that specific problem if you know what the problem was.
Interesting.
As long as you took out all the bad aspects of that virus. And like, for example, you don't let it's not contagious, right? So nothing else gets it. You take out those genes and things like that. You basically design the virus in such a way that it just does good things.
Yeah, cool.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's what I used to do. So I used to work with DNA. And then at 23andMe came out, and I'm like, man, I wonder if I can basically discover all this information about my own health, right? And not my ancestry, because I don't really care about my ancestry. I don't really care if I'm 5% Irish or whatever.
Right.
Just me personally, I don't care. But I do care a lot about what it can tell me about my health, and it tells me a shit ton about my health. Ancestry.com, they do 900,000 SNPs. That's a lot of info.
Yeah. Since you've done hundreds of these over the past almost decade, I think that probably is book number 2, like what you've learned just from like looking at those kinds of things.
That's exactly right. I'm working on a book, like book number 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Oh, really? On this topic?
Oh yeah. Because I'm actually doing one on Alzheimer's specifically because nobody's categorizing Alzheimer's properly in my mind. Like they're just calling it Alzheimer's, just like people used to call cancer, right? It's like, it's not cancer, it's lung cancer, it's prostate cancer, it's breast cancer. You have to specify. And then you figure out ways to treat the specific variety of it. But if you're just lumping it all together, it's absurd.
Those basically like the 3 main categories of inflammation and...
No, there's a bunch more. I didn't want to give away the whole book.
Got it. We'll wait for that book. When is that scheduled to be released?
I have no idea. I have so many things I'm working on right now. I might have to quit the Mayo Clinic and then just work on stuff like that. But I'm not sure. It's tricky. It's tricky because I like doing what I'm doing, and it needs to be done. Like the Alzheimer's book, that needs to be done soon. It's a huge issue.
Please, for people who are important in my life, please get that out to market soon, Dr. J. Thank you for all of the wisdom you've given to us. Before we get to how people can reach you and anything that you want to point them to, is there any final words of wisdom that you could provide our listeners around how they can make themselves more either estrogen educated or take action right now that would help keep them out of harm's way?
Yeah, well, get rid of the sunscreens that you got in your closet. Absolutely fundamental. I mean, they're making it illegal, and they made it illegal in Hawaii to use those sunscreens because they're killing off all the sea life. And there's 5 other countries that have pledged to make it illegal by like 2020 and 2021, that sort of thing, like Australia and New Zealand, all these places.
That's a really good indicator right there. If your sunscreen or something you're using is killing off animal life, don't use it.
Right.
Real simple one.
Yeah. And the personal care products, like overhaul those things. My website, AJ Consulting Company, which is a terrible URL name, but because you have to put the whole ajconsultingcompany.com in there. But if you go there and you look up what I use, the what I use page, like you did, right? And you looked up the personal care products that I use, it's a good start. You don't have to use the ones I personally use. I don't care. I don't have endorsements from companies. I refuse to have endorsements, so I'm not biased.
Cool.
But I have found some cheap ones over the years that are great. Personal care products are giant. Filtering the water, huge. And just cleaning up the diet with the processed soy foods and stuff like that, some of the flax stuff.
And flax is in everything, by the way. Like, it's in a lot of the nut bars. It's in a lot of crackers. It's in a lot of breads.
Health foods.
Health foods. So you gotta look at the labels. I never used to look at labels, but flax is in so much.
Right. And I do avoid grains. I really minimize grains. And if I do get them, I get organic ones. It's almost hard to find organic corn. Like organic corn chips are harder to find. Now Costco has them, but most people don't necessarily have a membership there. But corn is a huge problem, and the grains in general, because they're spraying a lot of these estrogenic herbicides on them. So that's another big one. I think if you knock out those, you're really on a good path.
Awesome. All right. Well, Dr. J, where other than ajconsultingcompany.com can our listeners reach you? Where do you want to point them?
Probably Instagram. Anthony GJ on Instagram is probably a fun place.
Yeah.
That's it. And I appreciate your time. It's fun.
We're going to link all of that. And also, I got a lot of value out of your YouTube channel. So Chagrin and Tonic, I know you've got thousands of followers there, which for a topic like this, which is really not very well known, I mean, you've done a hell of a job building that, and your videos are informative. The book, I thought you did a tremendous job taking something that could have been really convoluted and overwhelming, and you broke it down into these like really actionable items. So like the 10 categories of estrogens and these 7 deadly things. It was super helpful. Thank you. I've been playing the long game for a year now. I'm feeling the difference. I'm absolutely feeling the difference. And that's why I wanted to bring you on and pass on your wisdom.
Appreciate that. And I appreciate the wisdom that you've had just by implementing it, because there's a lot of people out there that when you give them the knowledge, they don't do jack about it, but that's a different kind of person who actually learns something and then acts on it. That's a good skill to have across the board.
Hell yeah, man. Look forward to us following up with our consultations on the DNA reporting, because that would be really helpful for both of us. And I think that we'll probably end up maybe even sharing some of the stuff that we learned on a future podcast.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Man Amongst Men podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want more access to tools and resources, and you want information on our upcoming live events and retreats, head on over to www.doinnerwork.com.